And if staff would be so kind as to queue us up for O Canada. Just for those who are watching at home, and I know those numbers continue to surprise me, we will not be showing it on the video on the screen for O Canada tonight because we're doing a presentation in a few minutes, and the screen would block that presentation piece. So if you'll indulge us, we'll just play the music, but feel free to sing at the top of your lungs, Tom. Please remain standing just for a moment and reflect upon something that is close to you or sensitive. And thank you. Thank you very much. Would somebody from around the council table be so kind as make a motion to approve the agenda before us? Moved by Councillor Follis, second by Councillor Ainsworth. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest based on the information that you have reviewed in your package? I see no hands in the air and no papers in front of me, so if anything does come to light as the meeting progresses, please raise your hand and bring that to our attention. We'll deal with it at that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lauer.
Sorry, Mayor Clark. I will be not participating in the report. Sorry, the grants report on the specific item of the vocal ensemble. My wife is a member.
Thank you very much. If you want to fill out the document on your table and forward that to staff, we'll keep that. And on that very same issue, if no other hands are in the air, I will be declaring on the Orillia Jazz Festival, as I have a business downtown that partakes in that particular festival. Thank you. Tonight's a special night. We have a couple of neat presentations that will speak to the progressive and cultural nature of our city. And first up, we have Shelley Kendall. I hope I'm saying that right, Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. Director of B City Canada is here to present council with Orillia's B City designation. And I know this is a poor attempt at humor, but it really has been creating a buzz lately. In all seriousness, I think I've been approached on this issue as much as I've been approached on any other issue in the last little while. So that's terrific.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here today. I love bee puns, too. I would like to thank His Honorable Mayor Clark and the Orillia City Councillors. Can I bring my thing? Okay.
Unless you need your notes or something.
I just have some gifts for you. Okay. Oh, okay. So I'd like to thank you all for taking on the commitment of becoming a bee city. And what it means, there's 3 pillars, and the first one is pollinator habitat, to create healthy pollinator habitat around your city. The second one is education, to educate ourselves and the residents of Orillia of the importance of pollinators and what everyone can do to protect them. And the third thing is celebration. Third week of June is National Pollinator Week, and Janine was at the farmers market to have a little celebration and to share her knowledge about bees and pollinators. So I'd like to thank you all, and I have the designation. So it says Bee City Canada declares the city of Orillia. Actually, you're the 28th city in Canada. We now have 30. My glasses. Having adopted on June 3rd, 2019, the resolution passed by City Council and signed by Steve Clark, Mayor, has completed all the requirements and is declared to be a bee city. Congratulations, City of Orillia. I have another gift.
Oh, yeah.
It's fine. So I have a few gifts for city councilors as well. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Janine. She's a resident of Orillia, and she brought this motion forward to city council, so we have a little bag that she's very beloved. And for the mayor and city councilors, I have a poster of some bees that live in our backyard. I know we only think about the honeybee, but there's actually almost close to 300 bees around here that live in the ground, and here's just about 150 of them. So I won't test any of you on that. And then for if I may, I'd like to pin you with a bee. These are handmade by a member of the deaf community, and it's felt, it's wool, it's from Ontario, and the color yellow is from calendula, which is a pollinator plant, native plant. So.
Beautiful. I assume there's a certain type of I don't know. Yeah, you definitely have to but No. You're the city hall, yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's 150. Yeah. Yeah. And some don't know. Yeah. know, I'll try to, I'll come later. Yeah. So.
Everybody's coming in line.
We're into it.
Showing you somebody who's dirty.
You go, Jane.
Sure, where is it? I can take it for you. Just gotta watch it go.
You're gonna say B. Thank you for approving. Thank you. That's okay.
So it's not always normal for us to have one presentation at council. Sometimes we have a deputation or two, but tonight we actually have two presentations. Make it even more special night because that was terrific. So we have a local artist of renown with us tonight, Dave Beckett. I've known Dave to some degree for 26 years. I know you're a very good friend with Councillor Ewan as well. No, you're denying. He's denying that, Ted, actually. But the work that Dave has put together over the number of decades is known in the area, known provincially, across Canada, and internationally. And not only is he an acclaimed artist with a great talent, but he's also very giving. And the event that you did at OMA last year, Dave, when you painted that picture in real time with people there and raising money for OMA was terrific. But I believe, so if you would join me up on stage, if you'd be so kind. There is room for us. I've tried to shed a pound or two. And Councillor Freeman, do you want to join us? I know, as I say, you guys are inseparable. So, JR, where's somebody bossing us around here? Or we just, no? Okay. So, is there anything you want to say, or do you want to maybe say a couple of words after we unveil it? Okay. So, maybe let's make sure that it's unattached here, that we're not going to wreak havoc, because I turn anything into a contact sport. So, Dave, perhaps on the count of three, we'll just take this without defacing the city of Orillia. We'll just drop this to the floor. So, 1, 2, 3.
Beautiful.
And if you've seen Dave's stuff, it's pretty well all nature related. Some great water scenes, great skies. Just he paints places where you want to go and live, and maybe live out the rest of your life, quite frankly. But Dave, now this is being donated to the city and will be hanging in the city. But Dave, I'll let you speak to that.
Thanks very much, Steve. I donated this to the city because they've been so good to me. The city is large. The people in Orillia have just been real champs and great supporters of me for, I guess, about 40 years. I was from Orillia originally. Moved here when I was a child, went to high school, and so on and so forth. I worked with crayons, and I still do, so I haven't grown up at all. But I do want the people of Orillia to be able to see this and enjoy it. Thanks so much.
That's the painting is beautiful, as all your stuff is, and the frame is absolutely stunning as well. A New Day. This is the painting has been given the moniker A New Day. Thanks, Dave. This will hang proudly in the city for decades and decades to come. Okay, tonight we also have from the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, Martin Kuhn, Tobacco Enforcement Officer, and Rebecca Dupuis, Substance Use and Injury Prevention Manager. They're here to present a request for funding related to cannabis legalization of legalization. Anyway, and you're welcome. Welcome to the hood. And you take your time, get comfortable, and whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation tonight to provide you a deputation on behalf of the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. My name is Rebecca Dupuis, and this is Martin Kuhn.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, for the invitation again. Dr. Gardner sends his regrets as he had a previous engagement, so we are here in his stead. Dr. Gardner will be sending a letter to the mayor commending this council on the comprehensive and muscular smoke-free and vape-free enhancements to Orillia's municipal code on May 15th, including protections for secondhand cannabis smoke and vapor. In particular, Orillia youth and children will benefit from the new bylaw for years to come by not being exposed to secondhand smoke and vapor on municipal property. The health unit is extremely pleased with your proactive stance.
Tonight we will provide a quick overview of some of the health unit's work related to legalization of cannabis and then provide an overview of the proposal. Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit's role is always one of prevention and protection of the health of their residents. The health unit encourages a cautionary and a harm reduction approach to recreational adult cannabis use with a focus on preventing youth access to cannabis and encourage a harm reduction approach for youth who use cannabis. With this overarching goal, this proposal will outline specific activities to be implemented in 2019 and 2020 to increase awareness of the health impacts of use, to prevent youth access, health impacts of youth using, to monitor usage, to respond to community needs, and implement enforcement of the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. By increasing our data collection on this issue, it will provide a foundation that will allow accurate current analysis, better ability to predict local needs, and help guide future program planning.
So we thought it would be helpful to provide a baseline for the provincial standard when it comes to the Smoke-Free Ontario Act and cannabis. The Smoke-Free Ontario Act was not just revised, but newly created essentially in October 2018 to go past tobacco to include cannabis and vaping. So this now includes prohibition of smoking, tobacco, or vaping, including cannabis, within 20 meters of the perimeter of a school, within 20 meters of the perimeter of a community recreational facility, prohibition of smoking of cannabis, tobacco, or vaping within 9 meters of the perimeter of a restaurant or bar patio, an enhancement of all prior outdoor smoking regulations, including 20 meters from playgrounds, sporting areas, to prohibit smoking cannabis or vaping. And of course, the Smoke-Free Ontario Act continued to allow municipalities such as the City of Orillia to go beyond the confines of the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, which you did in May of 2019. In addition to this work, tobacco enforcement officers with the Health Unit Smoke-Free program inspect all retail business throughout Simcoe Muskoka which sell tobacco and vapor products. So just to give you a snapshot of where we're at today, there are 434 premises which sell tobacco throughout Simcoe County. That's more places than sell bread and the District of Muskoka, and there's 321 premises which sell electronic cigarettes or vapes. That 321 premises is a massive spike in the number of places selling electronic cigarettes from 2017 and is a cause for great concern. These businesses are inspected multiple times throughout each calendar year for compliance with display and promotion regulations, and they're test shopped with youth test shoppers from the Simcoe Muskoka Health Unit to see if those youth can buy cigarettes or vapes. Within those 321 premises which sell electronic cigarettes are captured those places that sell cannabis paraphernalia used for vaping. So that's the broad strokes of the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. Cannabis stores, cannabis retail stores, places that are actually selling cannabis, are the responsibility of the AGCO.
The Substance Use and Injury Prevention Program, we have the focus of prevention, promotion, and harm reduction. So we want to normalize the conversation about cannabis, but not the use of it, and also develop public health resources and strategies in this period of rapid change and limited research. So in the past year, we've consulted with the Ministry on the proposed legislation in the summer of 2018, and most recently we consulted on the edible legislation that we anticipate coming out later this year. We raised awareness in terms of websites and social media. We had our campaign called Curious About Cannabis in order to raise awareness about the cannabis as a drug. We responded to many requests from various groups in our community, such as learning series, parent councils, and probus clubs. There are a lot of questions out there. And we created the guidance document to review the opt-in, opt-out options that municipalities had to make a determination of this past January. And it also included the model bylaw.
On November 20th, 2018, the President of AMO received a letter from the Honourable Minister of Finance, Vic Fedeli, outlining the Ontario Cannabis Legalization Implementation Fund, or OCLIF, and how the funds were to be distributed and for what purposes. The letter outlined the following purposes: funding to address the implementation costs that directly relate to the legalization of recreational cannabis, and examples of permitted costs include increased enforcement. These could be for police, for public health as delineated by law enforcement, court administration, and litigation. Increased response to public inquiries through 311 calls and correspondence, increased paramedic services, increased fire services, and then bylaw policy development, police, again, public health, and workplace safety policy.
We know that this is important work for all our municipalities in Simcoe Muskoka based on our stats. We know that youth usage is higher, has a higher average in Simcoe Muskoka than the province, especially in the grade 11 and grade 12 cohorts. Adults use reportedly in the past, about 13% are using cannabis, which is comparable to the provincial number. We know that men in Simcoe Muskoka smoke more frequently, and the highest are around the 20 to 34 age range with those with a high school education. Overall, long-term trends is downward since the early 2000s for youth. In 2015, 1 in 5 grade 7 to grade 12 students in Simcoe Muskoka reported being a passenger in a car driven by someone who had been using drugs other than alcohol. That's roughly 20%. In 2017, the Ontario stat indicated that less than half of that reported being a passenger. So it's good to have the decrease, but it still indicates that 10% of students are being in a vehicle with a driver under the influence. We're not clear exactly what Simcoe Muskoka data is because we do not have that for 2017. Driving while under the influence has decreased in 2017 according to the provincial data. In 2015, 10% of Simcoe Muskoka students reported driving. We do not have specific data for 2017. Most recently, stats indicate that cannabis consumption in Ontario has increased to about 20%. We know that 12% of Ontarians drive a vehicle within 2 hours of having consumed cannabis, and 4% of Ontarians were a passenger in a vehicle driven by someone who had consumed cannabis within 2 hours of driving. So when looking at those stats, we came up with a proposal looking at some activities that would help to address this. In there we estimated the costs, and then we looked at the populations of the 4 upper tier municipalities to determine the breakdown in terms of costs. And that's how we came up with the requests for each upper tier. So for Orillia, the total cost that was being proposed was just over $25,000, broken down for 2019 to just over $15,000, with the second year of 2020 being just under $10,000. So what were the proposed activities? There are 7 activities that we outlined in an attempt to address the legalization of cannabis in this chart. In that chart also reflects the criteria under the ministry heading and with rationale as to why the activity. So the first one, Curious About Cannabis campaign. This campaign ran in the fall. It was targeted towards the adult potential user, and it was just to bring insight in terms of the fact that cannabis has changed, especially from a time when maybe they recall in their younger days using it, that it's a different product and that they need to learn in order to be safe. The second area of activity was to develop a campaign with a focus on parents and youth allies. This was to increase the awareness of the issue, normalizing the conversation with teens, identifying the importance of delaying use, and/or harm reduction with youth messaging for the youth that they are using. The third one is the Ontario Student Drug Use and Health Survey. This will provide very important local data. Now that cannabis is legal, we are not sure what will have an impact on the youth, whether or not they will use more or less, whether it will change any decisions regarding driving under the influence or being a passenger. Parents remain a significant influence over their adolescents, so they can positively impact their teens' decision, and we would like to support them with that. The fourth activity is surveillance of hospitals. Having this information will assist in recognizing if there are any issues occurring which could impact on the residents, as well as providing data for local services such as paramedics, police, and our local hospitals for planning. The fifth activity is looking at our ability to respond to requests for service and our health connection line. We've had an increase in calls requesting information and more education and presentations that we can do to inform the residents of Simcoe Muskoka in terms of good information, reliable information, will help them to choose wisely for themselves and keep them safe. Enforcement is another area that we have activities in, and as we all know, this is a very new law with many details that have come out, and the public have not fully become aware of all of it, and so messaging and enforcement occurs. The better that is done, the better the laws will be known and more it will be adhered to. The last activity is called our Rapid Risk Factor Surveillance System. This is a tool where it's a survey done mostly on the phone where we find out, ask questions to the residents on a variety of health topics. We would be able to ask specific questions related to cannabis, so it really would give us a pulse, if you like, on what the issues, concern, and usages are from our residents. And this information would assist us with planning, perhaps doing campaigns, but we would be able to do it in a much more time-sensitive manner. So, as you know, we have asked for support from the 4 upper-tier municipalities, of which City of Orillia is one. We have also been in contact with the County of Simcoe, City of Barrie, and the District of Muskoka. We anticipate a contract with the county very shortly. The City of Barrie has provided us a letter of support outlining a financial support of $4,500,000. And we are in the discussion phase with the District of Muskoka. So as to recap, this is the numbers in terms of Orillia, that the total was $25,000 for 19 and 2020. And the funds that we're asking for will help us meet the goals of having an evidence-based response to cannabis, continue the engagement and enforcement activities, continue to increase community and individual knowledge and awareness, and support and consult with community partners and municipalities. And that's the end of the presentation. Questions?
Great, and thank you for that. It's an emerging issue or a part of our life. It's here, and so any education that we can get around the table in this chamber is appreciated. With that being said, I will open the floor for questions and/or comments. Councillor Spola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. And I want to thank Mark and Rebecca for their passion to educate our youth and our citizens on the adverse effects of cannabis and that. Will you share the information, and if we support you, will you share the information with the police department so that they have an idea of what they're dealing with, and with our city bylaw officers, so that we can look and see how we can implement some other educational process within our own community?
Yes, certainly the data that we would get for the Ontario Student Drugs Survey that we would anticipate getting in the very beginning of 2020 for the 2019 year would certainly be there, that we would be able to share. We would be putting it on our website and can certainly share it with other community partners. That's what we really want to do with it, yes.
Great. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Follis.
Thanks. Through the chair, I wondered, is there, do you foresee an opportunity for this program to incorporate things like tobacco or alcohol or opioids in terms of the education around it? I'm just curious on your perspective there.
I think that's a very good question, and one that we talk about frequently because often the messages are similar. For this pot of funding, it is meant for cannabis, and my understanding is that the ministry has asked that it be clearly outlined to go towards legalization of cannabis. And seeing how it is an emerging new issue for us, I believe that it deserves some of its own attention, and that we need to learn a bit more as residents about the cannabis. But that certainly, there is certainly overplay, and some of the messaging could easily, especially when you think of the work towards parents and youth allies, that could be applied to any substance that a parent and their child would be talking about.
Thank you both. Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark. First of all, folks, thank you so much for being here today. It's a big item that we talk about a lot. Not really any questions for you, but it's more of a comment for folks who are watching at home or in the audience. The stats in regards to people getting into vehicles with people who are either on drugs or under the use of alcohol and other things is really concerning to me, especially 1 in 5. Luckily, that's come down slightly in regards to the stats, but I think that shows us a bigger issue, which is actually adults talking to their children and saying, hey, if somebody is on drugs, maybe you shouldn't get in the vehicle, because clearly all of these people knew that the people were on drugs that they got in the vehicle with, because they did, fill out that survey and say, yes, I have been in a vehicle where somebody has been doing drugs. So that's something we need to push with our children and with people in the community and say, hey, if you know somebody is under the influence, make sure you don't get in the vehicle with them, and maybe say, hey, you probably shouldn't be driving, because it creates a lot of other issues as well.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ainsworth. Councillor Emont.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through you to our guests, thank you. As you are aware, we have allocated a significant portion of the funding that is coming to the City of Orillia for enforcement of the new bylaw. And I was just wondering if anywhere along the line the district health unit, either here in Simcoe, Muskoka, or across the province, have considered lobbying the province to change the Highway Act that would enable us to control vaping, tobacco smoking, and cannabis smoking on a number of our streets. One of the main complaints that I receive from both the merchants in downtown and from many of the people who shop there is the offensiveness of walking our main street and seeing the residue of that and having the aroma. And we've been unable, because of the Highway Act, to enforce that restriction there. I think that would be a major step towards our ability to contribute to the control of cannabis in our community.
Before you jump in, if I could just add to that, because that was the nature of my question as well. In your presentation, you referenced 9 meters from a patio of a hospitality establishment, and I believe 9 meters from a door is an entranceway. Is also supposed to be a buffer, but invariably those patios, for example, and often doors of merchants' buildings are on a sidewalk. The sidewalk for those here at home is deemed to be part of the highway, no matter where it is in our city and other cities. Therefore, the municipality has no stake in legislation with respect to smoking on that. So, yeah, I'm very curious in an answer to this as well, if indeed there is one.
So it's a couple aspects to this answer. There is no current buffer in Ontario for business doorways. Although Toronto did enact a bylaw to create these types of buffers, I think they're the only jurisdiction that's done that. So smoking on outdoors is permitted in Ontario for the most part, unless you're on hospital property. But now, again, within 20 meters of a community recreational facility, 9 meters of a patio, these are some of the outdoor areas. Councillor Emond is correct. The Municipal Act does delineate that a municipality cannot enact a bylaw, a smoke-free bylaw, going on to highway property, municipal boulevards. So Councillor Cipolla has often has brought this forward too. So what I would suggest is that perhaps with Councillor Cipolla's support at a Board of Health meeting, because this has been raised also by the City of Barrie, that Dr. Gardner and the Board of Health could perhaps more formally consider making that proposal to the province.
So just as a follow-up to that, so it has not been a formal request in the past?
There has not been a formal request made by the health unit to the province at this time.
Okay. Anyway, I'll go to Councillor Cipolla and then I may jump in with a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Dr. Gardner and I, and also Martin, Dr. Gardner is going to talk to Barrie and see if we can get the provincial government to give the municipalities the authority to legislate on sidewalks. I think Martin knows that Orillia is one of the second or third city to ban smoking within our city-owned properties and our public places. So one of the things we do want to get is the sidewalk part of it. I don't think we'll ever get the roads part of it because it is a highway through the Highway Act. Sorry? Cars, okay. But I think Dr. Gardner and Martin and I have been working really hard to get Barry on side. And once we get Barry on side, to lobby the province to eliminate this, to allow us to legislate on sidewalks. I think that would be a win for all of us and a win for our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah, so Martin, I'm guessing by your comment that you're not aware. The jurisdictions in this county have not made a formal request, but it has perhaps happened elsewhere, or has it not?
Not to my knowledge, but again, for some reason, Simcoe County municipalities are extremely aggressive in their pursuit of smoke-free spaces. So I wouldn't be surprised if, based on perhaps the work that Councillor Cipolla does with Barry and with Dr. Gardner, that we would be first out of the gate with this type of formal request to the province. The Municipal Act was amended when the legalization of cannabis happened, because to expand the Municipal Act to allow for cannabis to be taken into the Municipal Act in addition to tobacco. So the province has cracked open the Municipal Act as recently as the end of last year.
Thank you for that. If it's the will of council, maybe not to be discerned tonight, I am willing to take direction and join that effort and help speak with Barry. We also have on our council a member of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, and that also may be a point where we maybe even begin to lobby for that type of change, because as you understand it, I'm sure if we got AMO on side, then it would carry a significant amount of weight as we go forward. Councillor Cipolla, do you want to bring us home on this?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if council is agreeable, and Martin and Rebecca, if you think it's a good idea for the mayor to write a letter to the health unit in support of banning smoking on sidewalks to go to the province. And I think the mayor and staff can word it appropriately, that just seeking for support. And I'd be happy to move a motion to that effect, Mr. Mayor, if the rest of council is agreeable to that. And Martin, if you think it's a good idea to have some kind of support from our municipality to the health unit to take it to the next step, that would give me a lot of strength when we talk to Barry and when we talk to make the presentation at the health unit.
I believe, Councillor Cipolla, in answer to your suggestion that we can contemplate that between now and part of the agenda that deals with deputation motions.
Okay, thank you.
So, listen, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. And I have a feeling we'll be chatting further.
Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Would somebody be so kind from around this table to move a motion to accept the minutes of June? One moment, please. Okay, apparently there's a bit of a technical issue in the communication between at least my microphone and maybe all the microphones and at home. So to whatever degree we can, Councillor Cipolla, we'll have somebody looking at that. I am curious how you receive that information. We'll discuss that later. But seeing as we don't, anyway, I will look into that. And I'm going to go back to the business at hand. And if there is distortion in the audio signal between here and home, we apologize and we'll look into that. May I have somebody please make a motion to accept the minutes of June 3rd, 2019 public meeting replanning matter, as well as on June 3rd, we had a meeting with respect to regular meeting of council. Moved by Councillor Campbell. Looks like you want to second it as well. Seconded by Councillor Emond. All in favor? Sorry, any discussion? Errors, omissions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Nothing under the correspondence part of our agenda this evening. We'll go right into reports, and I will look to our assistant clerk or deputy clerk for any items being pulled for discussion and or change of direction. Ms. Williams.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark. The first report deals with the Budget Committee report stemming from the June 6th meeting. So that is just one item that's on the agenda. So we'll just look for a mover and a seconder to introduce that.
Thank you. Then we'll. So if I'm looking for a potential direction changer to speak to any of the items and reports, first of all, we'll deal with Clause 1. Is that what you're suggesting? And you're.
Yes, just to provide clarification, Mayor Clark, the first item has a single clause. It's report number 2019-4 of Budget Committee. So certainly we're just looking for a mover and a seconder to introduce that. And if a member wishes to speak to that item, they may do so at that time. So
clause number 1 will be dealt with separately. And when we get to clause 2, report 2, I will ask if there are any clauses being pulled. Okay. I didn't know if that happened at the beginning of the report. Do you think I would know that after about 5 years? But apparently the mayor is a little slow on the uptake. So I will look for a mover and second moved by Councillor Ains or seconded by Councillor Eamon. And I'll wait for the paperwork to hit my desk. So moved by Councillor Ains or seconded by Councillor Eamon that the first report, number 2019-4 Budget Committee, now before Council be adopted. Before I ask for a discussion or debate on this, I'll just remind those here and at home that under reports, and for that matter, the consent agenda, part of our overall agenda, especially at Council, these are traditionally items that were dealt with last week at Council Committee. This is kind of an in-between. We have essentially a week of sober second thought, and this is for ratification. So you don't see the full breakdown of all the report here, but if you do wish to see it, it's on our website, or you can show up in person and see it. And as I say, we dealt with it last week, and this is more or less for ratification, but sometimes there's a change of direction. Is there any further questions or comments on this issue? I will now call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now I guess this is where you will indulge me, Madam Deputy Clerk, and let me know if there are any items being pulled from the clauses in report number 2.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. At this time, I am aware of Councillor Lauer wishing to pull item 1 for a potential change. That's with respect to the Affordable Housing Committee Constitution bylaw. And Councillor Lauer is also wishing to pull item number 2, clause 2, for a potential postponement. That is with respect to the municipal accommodation tax matter. And Councillor Lauer is also wishing to pull item 3 for a potential postponement. That is with respect to the cross-connection report. And item 4 is being pulled for a recorded vote. That is Councillors Eamon and Councillor Lauer, and that is with respect to the Forest Avenue South Road allowance.
Indeed, thank you. You're a very busy member of Council, Councillor Lauer. So I will wait and entertain a motion to encapsulate the ones that aren't up for potential change. Is there a mover or seconder for the motion that you see on the screen before you? Moved by Councillor Klustra. This is basically to capture the other, and seconded by Councillor Campbell. The motions to the clauses that you see referenced in this proposed resolution will be dealt with separately. Moved by Councillor Klustra, seconded by Councillor Campbell, that report number 2019-7 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted with the exception of clauses 1, 2, 3, and 4, which shall be introduced separately. Is there any further discussion on the items that are not items 1, 2, 3, or 4? I will now call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And Ms. Williams, I'm going to guess that we're going to deal with each of these separately. Is there a mover and shaker, a mover and a seconder for the clause on the screen before you? You got it on the floor? Moved by Councillor Follows, seconded by Councillor Imon. I will now wait for the paperwork. Moved by Councillor Follows, seconded by Councillor Imon, that Clause 1 of Report Number 2019-7 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. And this is indeed with respect to the affordable housing terms of reference, et cetera, that we dealt with last week. Councillor Lauer, would you like to begin discussion?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I do have an amendment that I would like to put forward. I believe staff has it prepared. As you mentioned, this clause has to do with the constitution for the new Affordable Housing Committee. Contained within that constitution are, I think there are 7 or 8 recommendations, narrowed down from original 14 recommendations. One of them has to do with incentives. And what this amendment would accomplish would be to ask the Housing Committee to make that their initial focus and to bring forward a report on possible incentive policies and programs. The reason I'm doing this is I think that this particular issue has been on our table several times over the last couple months, and that it would be, we'd be well served if we had a policy or a policy in place that we could refer to, and would also give predictability to groups coming to council. It would give them an indication of what they could expect and what kind of reception they could expect.
Thank you, Councillor Lauer. Any further? Sorry, I guess is there a seconder for your amendment, Councillor Lauer? Seconded by Councillor Campbell, and I'll wait for the paperwork. Ms. Williams. Moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Campbell by a whisker over Councillor Cipolla, that the motion now before Council be amended to add the following, with the exception that the following paragraph be added, and that the committee be requested to initially focus on the creation of an incentive policy / program and report back to Council by December of this year, 2019. Any discussion on this amendment? Councillor Cipolla.
Do that.
Councillor Cipolla, you may hate when I do that, and I know
you're looking over there and calling my
well,
name.
I want to make sure everybody's on the ball, but also, Councillor Cipolla, I can't help but believe that there's somebody at home right now just giggling away that they called in or messaged you and said there's a buzz on the microphones when not all of us are wearing our bees. But anyway, I think somebody might have been happy.
No, that's. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our CAO. Does this contravene anything that the provincial government is doing? I totally support what Councillor Lauer is trying to do here, but does this go against what the province is trying to do with their incentive programs for affordable housing, and also what the federal government has done, has made funds available for it? Will that contravene what we're trying to do here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do not believe that the amendment that is before you would contravene any provincial or federal legislation. I think what the councillor is looking for is simply that the Housing Committee actually focus on the various incentive programs that are out there. So part of their overall report back to council will, I'm sure, take into consideration the provincial programs, the federal programs, and then what they would recommend to council as potential programs for the city.
Indeed, thank you. I would certainly concur from the limited knowledge the chair has. Any further discussion on this amendment? Councillor Follis.
Thanks. Through the chair, I hesitantly am going to oppose this, although I do appreciate the efforts of Councillor Lauer. I think this might restrict the committee a bit too much. Not that it wouldn't be one of the possibilities or viable options. I just think that right now we're kind of in the process of coming to terms with what we're going to focus on. So this might it might point us in the right track, but it might divert us a bit. So although I'm not adamantly opposed, I'm going to oppose it because I think the committee might have come to develop a different path going forward. But I do appreciate the effort.
I look to see how adamantly you put your arm in the air, or don't. Councillor Iman.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I just went back and looked at the terms of reference, and I don't see any in the list of priorities that would be a prerequisite to our ability to move this particular thing forward at an earlier stage. And I think it's important for both the committee and my colleagues to remember that these are advisory committees to council. And if it's council's will that they focus on a particular attention, it may not be the committee's view, but if it's council's view, they're appointed by us to do our bidding. And so I'm comfortable that if council passes this, and I will support this amendment, that is a legitimate and appropriate direction that this council is giving to one of our committees to act on our behalf and to bring us a report at their convenience and hopefully at the earliest that will enable us to do as Councillor Lauer has said, because there has been a great deal of angst, at least in some of us, over the last several months as we have tried to come to grips with requests of significant financial impact on our city from organizations seeking assistance in this area, and this would be a real advantage. So.
Thank you for that, Councillor Iman. Any further discussion, questions, comments? I'll call the question on the amendment to the main motion. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And it was adamantly opposed by one member of council. Would anybody like the original motion be reread? It sits before you as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Clause 2, I have a feeling, is making its way onto the screen as we speak. This is with respect to the municipal accommodation tax. I will call the question before I ask if there is Councillor Lauer for you to speak to the proposed delay, postponement. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Klooster as the mover, Councillor Heen as the seconder. And moved by Councillor Klooster and seconded by Councillor Heen that Clause 2 of Report Number 2019-7 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. Any discussion? Councillor Lauer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Again, I'm asking if I could get a postponement on this, if someone would second that. I've had conversations since our last meeting. We had quite a lengthy discussion on this particular issue, and what I'm referring to is the Ontario Lake Country name and the associated funding. I am asking for a postponement. Apparently, Lake Country is meeting on July 8th, and we'll be discussing this. This is on their agenda. The actual question about perhaps making Orillia a little bit more prominent in the name, and we will be able to have more information by our July meeting and make a better decision, I think.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ruff, did you wish to make a comment? You're okay. You're here to answer questions should the need arise. Councillor Sapola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support the postponement. Actually, I would prefer if we included Orillia in the motion, but out of respect for Ontario Lake Country and for support Councillor Lauer in this, I will support the motion.
Thank you very much. Any more discussion on the overall motion? In that case, this is a verbal motion. There's a motion to postpone moved by Councillor Lauer, and seconded by Councillor Cipolla. Any further discussion on the motion to postpone? All in favor? That is so carried. Madam CAO, one thing I did not do was assign a date to that, but I think we heard from Councillor Lauer that it could be addressed at the July meeting of regular meeting of council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. We'll earmark this to come back July the 18th.
Thank you very much. And a motion that is on the floor before us with respect to cross-connection and backflow prevention program. Is there somebody that is willing to move and second it? It's moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. And moved by Councillor Campbell and seconded by Councillor Ainsworth that Clause 3 of Report Number 2019-7 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. Clause 3 reads that the report number ESO 1906, thank you, dated June 4th, 2019 from the Environmental Services and Operations Department regarding an overview of the annual cross-connection and backflow for prevention program be received as information. Any discussion on the main motion before I entertain discussion on the entertain a resolution to postpone? Okay, and Councillor Lauer, do you have a seconder to postpone?
Well, thank you, Mayor Clark. I will make that motion. I would recommend a postponement, and I would be looking for someone to second it. If
it's okay, Councillor Lauer, I'll put it on the floor and then come back to you for discussion. Seconded by Councillor Fallis. In that case, Councillor Lauer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Fallis. I know that backflow prevention is important to you as well. So this was an issue that I brought forward as an inquiry, and after the meeting we received it as information. Then I received a bit more correspondence from one constituent in particular who has got some fairly significant ideas on this and how we might improve the service. Unfortunately, through my own busyness, I couldn't get hold of Andrew Shell and have a proper discussion about this, so I'm asking it to be postponed till the July meeting, which would permit me to have a further conversation with the director.
Thank you very much. So I have I'm entertaining discussion on the postponement. So moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Fallis. Any further discussion on the postponement? I will call Madam CAO until the July meeting. Indeed. As was articulated by Councillor Lauer, I will now call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. This next motion, I believe, has just been pulled for a recorded vote. Okay, I will. Is there a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Eamon, seconded by Councillor Campbell. That would be apropos. And moved by Councillor Eamon, seconded by Councillor Campbell, that Clause 4 of Report Number 2019-7 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. Clause 4 reads that further to the report, thank you, ED 1912 dated June 11th, 2019 from the Economic Development Department, the Forest Avenue Working Group be dissolved, and that staff be directed to collect feedback from the Grape Island residents and the neighbors of the road allowance, regarding the core issues regarding the use of the Forest Avenue South Road allowance and municipally owned water lot, and that staff be directed to prepare a report outlining options for a solution which takes into account feedback obtained, and that $7,500 be approved and allocated from the operating contingency for legal fees. Any discussion? Councillor Eamon.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. We did receive an email today asking for the vote to be recorded. I personally have absolutely no problem in all of our votes being recorded, but I understand from a processing point of view it slows us up. So when a constituent feels that this is something that they need to have, I'm more than happy to accommodate that. So that's the reason why it's pulled for that reason. I would just like to make a comment on the motion, and that is that during the past week since we introduced this and asked residents of Grape Island and the Victoria Point area to comment to us if they had comments. I want to thank those who did, in fact, send us quite thoughtful and in some cases, very detailed emails outlining their point of view. That's exactly what I was hoping would be solicited in the second part of this as we go forward. So some people have taken the opportunity to get ahead of the curve and table those opinions. That's absolutely valid, and we will certainly have those and keep those as we work over the next several weeks and months or month to gather additional information before we come back to this table with recommendations. So it's much appreciated. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Councilman. Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, I will be supporting this motion moving forward, and the reason for that is, from my understanding from folks I've talked to on the working group and elsewhere, the working group has, clearly not come to an applicable solution for everybody at the table, so I'm fine with that being dissolved. I think it's important that staff talk to folks a little bit more, bring back some options to the table for council to decide on, and we get to decide on one of those options. I feel like this issue has gone on for far too long, and it's about time that we get something solid on the table for council to decide on.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councillor Spola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if Councillor Eamon or yourself has a date in mind for bringing this report back. I mean, as Councillor Ainsworth has just said, this has been going on for a long, long time. And I personally, and as well as some of the people I've talked to and have sent me emails as well, Councillor Eamon, they would like to see this resolved sooner rather than later. They don't want to go another 3 or 4 years with this. So if we can come up with a date when this report comes back to council, I will support it.
From the chair, just my perspective, indeed, Councillor Eamon, I think folks here and at home and certainly in the audience rather and around the council table would probably agree that it's gone on for quite a while. So therefore, the sooner a resolution comes forward, probably the greater happiness and joy in Whoville. But I just want to make I wouldn't want to rush staff. We've got a comprehensive list of work on the table right now. Also, we want to make sure something comes back that's comprehensive and doable. So maybe I'll ask Madam CEO to weigh in on what the timeline could be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as council is aware, the lead staff on this particular file is Laura Thompson, and we have her certainly busy working on waterfront development, etc. So I'm sure that she would endeavor to have something potentially for the August meeting. But again, it is with the caveat that we certainly want to do the consultation process and be able to garner all the information that we need in order to ensure that it's a complete report. So at this point, I would suggest it could potentially be August. Definitely won't be in July, Mr. Mayor, but it could. I could ask her to see if she could focus on that August meeting. So I can certainly get confirmation from her and produce a CIP to let members of council know when, in fact, that would be coming forward. From the chair,
I would suggest that maybe that not be articulated in the resolution, but staff take that as direction. Councillor Eamon?
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and thank you, Madam CAO. That timing I appreciate because we recognize that it's during the summer that the Grape Islanders are primarily here in Orillia, and so it gives us an opportunity to engage them personally without dragging it into the fall. Councillor Campbell and I are meeting with staff tomorrow evening to map out a series of steps that will take place. So we will operate that series of steps with the idea that we come back with a suggestion of how to proceed at our August meeting. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion before you? Seeing none, I will ask staff to prepare us for a recorded vote.
Mr. Mayor, members may proceed to vote. And I will end the vote now. The results, Councillor Campbell, yes. Councillor Follis, yes. Councillor Ainsworth, yes. Councillor Heen, yes. Councillor Sepola, yes. Councillor Cloustre, yes. Mayor Clark, yes. Councillor Eamon, yes. Councillor Lauer, no. The motion is carried.
All right. Anyway, and that is passed, as staff have well said. Thank you. I'll postpone. Okay, we are now on to clause number. Sorry, staff, I've lost my place here on my reports. What number?
Report number
3. Oh. Yeah, so we're out of clause 2, sorry, report 2 clauses. Now we're into report 3, and we have 2 being pulled for separate discussion. And so we'll capture the other 2 remaining items. May I have a mover and seconder for these, please? Moved by Councillor Heen, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. And moved by Councillor Heen and seconded by Councillor Ainsworth, as recommended in the Grants Committee Report number 2019-02, dated June 17th, 2019. Thank you. The following general grants be approved. Born to Read Committee, $750, and Orillia Terry Fox Run Committee, $706.87. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Who are we kicking out first? We're kicking out. Okay, I think Councillor Ainsworth, would you please take the chair?
Sure, folks. We have a motion before us that is that as recommended in the Grants Committee Report 2019-02, dated June 17th, 2019. The following general grant be approved: Orillia Jazz Festival for $1,000. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Eamon, seconded by Councillor Heen. Any discussion? No. Seeing none. All those in favor, and that is carried. Thank you so much. I will get back to you. Don't worry.
All right, we're on to the last budget item. Is there a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Follis, seconded by Councillor Heen. And moved by Councillor Follis and seconded by Councillor Heen. That is recommended in the Grants Committee Report number 2019-02, dated June 17th, 2019. The following general grant be approved: for the Orillia Vocal Ensemble, $1,500. Discussion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Welcome back into the fold, Councillor Lauer. Report number 4. I'll wait for it to hit the screen. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Cloustra, seconded by Councillor Campbell. Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. Moved by Councillor Cloustra, seconded by Councillor Campbell. And please, for those here and not here, indulge me. So take a moment or two. Whereas the Samuel de Champlain Monument is a public art installation located within the City of Orillia's Couchiching Beach Park on a parcel of land owned and maintained by the federal government. And whereas it was erected to commemorate the advent into Ontario of European settlers under Champlain's leadership as a symbol of goodwill between the French and English. And whereas concerns over the monument's representation of Indigenous peoples has been raised by members of the public and Indigenous communities with Parks Canada and the City of Orillia. And whereas, as a result of the concerns expressed at the request of Parks Canada, the creation of a Samuel de Champlain Monument Working Group was established with the following voting members. Parks Canada, co-chair, 2 representatives. City of Orillia, co-chair, 2 representatives. Chippewas of Rama First Nation, 2 representatives. The Huron-Wendat Nation, 2 representatives. Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, 2 representatives. Citizen at Large, City of Orillia resident. Citizen at Large again, or as well, citizen of Orillia resident. And whereas the primary mandate of the Samuel de Champlain Monument Working Group was to pursue inclusive public consultations and report back to Council and Parks Canada on an appropriate path forward for the Champlain Monument that is respectful and representative of both Indigenous and non-Indigenous perspectives. And whereas the final decision regarding the future of the monument resides with Parks Canada, now therefore be it resolved that based on the outcome of the recently almost completed, I will seek direction on that in a moment, Madam CAO, as there is now been one more meeting scheduled, at least one more meeting, that based on the outcome of the recently completed Parks Canada City of Orillia consultation process, the City of Orillia supports the reinstallation of the Champlain Monument in its original form, and that Mayor Clark and Councillor Lauer work with representatives from the Chippewas of Rama First Nation and Huron-Wendat Nation to, 1, create an accompanying narrative that would more accurately reflect the complete history and context of the Champlain Monument, and explore additional strategies that would assist the community in helping move the national issue of reconciliation forward in a meaningful way. And that a copy of this report be forwarded to Parks Canada to assist in their decision-making process related to the future of the Samuel de Champlain Monument. Discussion. I just want to get a little bit of Madam CAO, the top of page 2, where it says that based on the outcome of the recently completed, essentially it is not completed now, as there has been so I'm just looking for a little direction on the wording of that. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as it's worded right now, it indicates that based on the outcome of the recently completed Parks Canada City of Orillia consultation process. So is the door still open for the consultation process?
Indeed. So yes, that particular working group could continue.
Yes, Mr. Mayor,
this refers
yes.
to the consultation progress. Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Follis.
Thanks. I have a statement prepared for this, and I apologize, it's a bit of a long one, but I think it's an important one for me to make. I'm actually a real lover of history, and throughout high school and university, I would say that while political science was my bread and butter, history was always my passion. It is somewhat ironic, I think, that it is that side of my brain that loves history, Orillia history especially, that is finding this proposal in its entirety tough to accept. I believe that creating an accompanying narrative that would more accurately reflect the complete history and context of the Champlain Monument is a wonderful idea, an essential idea. Celebrating Indigenous history and art in a meaningful way could help make this a fuller conversation. I even believe that reestablishing the monument with some changes could bring about an image worth projecting, an image that many more in our town can be proud of. However, I fear that recommending that the monument change in no way unnecessarily puts pressure on Parks Canada to conform with our ask. Having consulted with many Indigenous people on this monument, whether we like it or not, the unfortunate reality is, these are my own personal consultations, whether we like it or not, the unfortunate reality is that this monument's imagery hurts and causes pain for many Indigenous Canadians. While I certainly think that part of Orillia's history has been the Champlain Monument, certainly an incredible piece of art throughout the courses I took and the histories I've heard, I'm painfully aware of the other side of the story, one that tells of a population that has been mistreated and ignored, a population that our society had brutally tried to forget about, While I completely understand the drive of many passionate Orillians to hold on to something so dear to them, something that had been a feature of our city for decades, I couldn't sleep knowing we had a chance to make a prominent Orillia landmark much more fitting of our sunshine quality, rather than an image that some perceive to be hateful, derogatory, and disrespectful. I hope going forward that our city finds a happy medium, both remembering Champlain's noteworthy visit to our town as it once was, as well as the residents of our town that were here many millennia before the first European settlers. I think if we do this a little differently, we will have a chance to make an inclusive history for ourselves. I'm going to be proposing the following change to this report by replacing the phrases "in its original form" to the following line with culturally sensitive modifications that are in line with the goals of Indigenous reconciliation. My intention in doing this is to leave the door open for something similar to what has been done in Ottawa, and essentially it's actually quite a similar situation. There was a Champlain statue, Nepean Point, looking over Parliament Hill, and below the statue was an Anishinaabe scout peering over the water. And actually, relative to our own statue, I'd argue that the imagery was not as controversial as our own. However, the placement of an Indigenous person at Champlain's feet still suggested a significant power imbalance between the two figures. The Indigenous scout was eventually given a new location close by and became a unique piece of art unto itself, with its own plaques and focus, and allowed that figure to be visible from all angles, which prior had not been the case. While this does not solve the controversy entirely, it does give us a more accurate depiction of history. I really believe that this could be the viable option and a way for both sides to come together on this. Thank you very much to all. I hope my fellow councillors and council members will support this amendment in the spirit of working towards Indigenous reconciliation. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Follis. I will make a comment on what type of direction I believe your suggestion is, and I will probably articulate a few comments of my own. Not from in the chair. I will seek council's guidance on that. But in the meantime, I'll go to Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, I do not have a big statement prepared, unfortunately, for this, but I will make a few comments. I will be supporting the motion moving forward. I do have personal views about the whole monument, but I think those are relevant when it comes to being at this table. It's about what the constituents want, and I heard very loud and clear during the election that people want that back and they want the monument back. It's great that we might have other options around the table in the surrounding area to discuss some of these things, which I think is good. But even today I was down walking through the park and someone came up to me and said, hey, why isn't the monument back yet? It needs to get back here. So it's something that a lot of people within our community are talking about, and it's not just Orillia people. There's people in the surrounding areas as well that really want to see it back there. So with that being said, I will be supporting the motion as it is.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainsworth. Councillor Iman.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. It was my understanding that the report is a report of what the committee found. So I'm not going to be in favor of the amendment, but not necessarily for that reason, because I have great sympathy for the point of view that my colleague has put forward. But I think my view is very simply that this is a piece of artwork that was a result of a global appeal, a global contest to create a piece of art. If the art today is offensive, then let's remove the art. Let's not desecrate something that is of that great renown. Let's take it away. In the same manner that there are many across this country who feel that John A. Macdonald is no longer an appropriate representative of the start of our nation. We don't cut off the heads of a statue so that we don't know what it is. We take the statue away. So if we're going to remove the statue, maybe that's the appropriate exercise, and today would be a perfect time to initiate another global contest to create a piece of art that could, in fact, better reflect our today's point of view with respect to the history of the Indigenous people in our community. And that might be an idea that Councillor Lauer and Mayor Clark could float back with the committee. But in terms of what this report is doing, it stands on its own merit as the position that has been taken by the group, and I will support it in its current form.
Thank you very much, Councillor Iman. Councillor Ainsworth, if you would be so kind as to take the chair for, unless people allow me to speak from here, but I think I should take the chair, or leave the chair. Thank you.
Well, folks, seeing that there's no further discussion on this now, Mayor Clark, I see you'd like to make a statement.
I would, and thank you for that, Councillor Ainsworth. Listen, the one thing I'm pretty confident in saying, I think everybody around this table, everybody within the working group, everybody within our community, and certainly our wonderful First Nations Friends community, and communities beyond, we'll all have the same ultimate goal. And that is to really find ways to move forward together in a meaningful way, and recognizing things that have happened in the past. I do agree, Councillor Follis, that the monument is a misrepresentation of that period in history, and I also, I mean, it was erected as a conciliatory effort between the French and the English just after the conscription issue of World War I. And I also agree that the depiction, as big and rugged and beautiful as those Indigenous sculptures are, they appear, because of where they are, to be the Indigenous folks appear to be have been a distant third consideration. And certainly that could be considered because of the placing on the monument of inequity of power. And we know that the relationship that the Huron-Wendat had in the 1600s with Champlain was one of mutual respect and mutual benefit. So for that reason and other reasons, I do believe, and this is why I was very open to getting involved in this process about 4 years ago, I do believe there needs to be better interpretation of our Indigenous past in this area that goes back some 5,000 years, and for many, for centuries, and well, for thousands of years, First Nations came together at the Narrows and celebrated, and of course we have the remnants of the fish weirs to this day to signify that. So I do believe the whole history needs to be told. I think the history that is worth celebrating, you know, the gathering at the Narrows, the wonderful cultural infusion that has taken place over the years between our two cultures and continues to this day. And it's one of the things I've enjoyed most as mayor since coming to office. But also the history that should never be celebrated, that of residential schools, the 60s scoop, not having the vote until just a few decades ago, and other things such as needing permission to leave the reserve. And as I say, some of these things don't date back that far. Because some of these things I didn't actually learn until I came to, until I took this office. And I'm embarrassed as a mayor of a city and as a person that has been around for the years that I have, that I don't have some of that. I didn't have some of that education. So I believe that that education needs to take place. I do believe that education can take place with a very meaningful, thoughtful, significant additional interpretive piece or pieces adjacent to the Champlain Monument, and maybe even winding a trail out to the Narrows. So again, I just want to remind folks that this is just a culmination of what Councillor Lauer and I learned from public consultations, meetings at the working group, presentations at the working group, and certainly the survey that was put out. This will go back to the working group, and the working group may reflect a slightly different direction. And if it serves all the purposes that maybe I stated and the councillor and other councillors have stated, that may be just as meaningful and work just as well. And of course, the working group's recommendation, when it's done, will go to Parks Canada, where I'm sure it'll be adjudicated with all the things that we've talked about and everything considered. So I look forward to how that process unwinds. In the meantime, I would like to make an amendment, and I guess I'll hop back into the chair in a moment to Councillor Ainsworth. I need to speak to Councillor Follis's direction, but I would in the resolution somewhere here I know I read. It says, and that Mayor Clark and Councillor Tim Lauer work with representatives of Chippewas, Rama First Nation, and Huron-Wendat too. I would love to leave that preamble attached to the action item number 1. And action item number 2, and I think I've spoken with staff to this, because Councillor Follis obviously has a passion for this, and I would hate to see that passion go unutilized. So if we can change the direction of the second direction item number 2, and that it read and that Councillor Lauer and Councillor Follis work with representatives to accomplish item number 2. If I have a seconder for that amendment.
Sure, Councillor Follis, in response to that.
Just curious, I had an amendment I was proposing. I wondered if that gets, does that get deliberated on first, or?
So just on that point, we don't have anything on the floor yet for a formal amendment. There's nothing that's moved or seconded. So at this point, it's just more of a discussion. And then when we get through that, we'll get into the amendments that we want to get on the table and kind of go from there.
Okay. Sure. Sorry, just for clarity there. So are we then addressing this one first?
Mayor Clark?
If I may, Councillor Ainsworth, through you as chair, to my council colleague, Councillor Follis, I'm quite willing to get back in the chair and deal with your issue first, if you wish.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Perfect. Mayor Clark, would you like your chair back for now?
Madam CAO, I do have an opinion from the chair on Councillor Follis's desired direction or stated direction. What I would suggest from the chair is that it would materially changes the direction, and therefore wouldn't be an amendment, but it would be the way that he would get that accomplished is to have the main motion defeated and bring back the new motion with that direction in it. Now, if you would weigh in on that, I would appreciate it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would concur with your suggestion in terms of how that suggestion by Councillor Follis is dealt with. It is my understanding that where he would like to head is essentially contrary to how this motion has been presented. So consequently, if he's looking for that change, then what members of council would do is essentially defeat this motion, and he would at that point in time bring forward his alternative direction. Just worth noting, Mr. Mayor, and as members of council will certainly see, there's a lot of sort of preamble to this motion that just provides some context to the overall issue. If Councillor Follis is successful to bring his issue forward, that preamble would continue with that motion. That wouldn't be something that council would defeat. That's just part of the context to the overall motion.
Great, thank you. Councillor Heen?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Well, as you know, this is something that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time. The Champlain statue has been the center of our park for many, many years, and countless people in our community have climbed over it, had pictures taken on it, and have very strong feelings about it. And it's a part of who we are and what we are, and it's part of our history, and they're right. Many others, mostly young people, who likely don't fill out surveys because that's just not who they are, feel as Councillor Follis says, that the statue is inappropriate and it doesn't fit in with our worldview, and they're right as well. And so how do we solve the problem? I attended one of the focus groups. I attended the Teach and Learn at the museum and saw both sides of it. There were some young students from Regent Park, the young Indigenous men, who were extremely articulate. And one of the questions they asked before they left is, they said, may we ask our elders, how many of you learned about residential schools when you went to school? And of course, none of us had. None of us had that education in our past, because we didn't learn about such things when we went to school. So times have changed and we're learning more. So before today, knowing that this was coming up, I reached out to a couple of elders in Rama that I respected and knew very well, because I wanted to get their feelings. I wanted to know how they felt about this, and I read them the motion as it was put forward, as it was being put forward. One of my friends actually was in Scotland, so she had to email me back, and she said, I think it hits all the right points, and so do I. The other one asked me a number of questions about it, and he was comfortable with it. And so, as these are well-respected people from the Rama community, I'm willing to accept the motion as it was, because I agree that we know that what happened 400 years ago needs to be addressed. We need to move forward with some kind of an articulation that speaks to what happened, to educate people so that they understand that Champlain and the First Nations people at the time did meet on an equal footing, and that if the First Nations people at the time had not cared for Champlain, he would not have survived that winter. And that needs to be taught, and we need to put that forward. I can also tell you that my First Nations friends told me that the men that posed for the sculpture were very proud to have done so, and that my friends told me that their fathers used to point them out and say, "Those are the men," and they were proud to have been part of that statue, and think of that was their legacy, that they would be remembered for many years. So there's that side of the story as well. So we don't want to lose that part.
Thank you, Councillor Heen. Any further, thank you for that. Any further discussion on the main motion? Councillor Lauer, I'll come back to you, Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just a couple of things. First of all, thanks to Council for putting me on this committee. It was a great committee. There are great people involved, and a lot of people with very good intentions. All sides have been represented in this. Certainly, we had excellent representation from Dan Schilling and Evelyn Ball from Rama First Nations. The Wendat unfortunately couldn't participate to the degree that I'm sure they would have liked to, because of their location in Quebec, and it just logistically didn't work out that well. I guess I went in and had quite a learning experience, but I think the biggest thing I learned was how much I haven't learned. And it's just amazing how fascinating that history is, and I'm really looking forward, going forward to re-education on not only the macro history, but certainly our local history is very intriguing. So I'm looking forward to that process. I just want to make it absolutely clear that we are, Councillor Clark, that would be Mayor Clark, and I are not bringing forward the consensus opinion of the committee. We are bringing forward our interpretation of the consultation period. This motion is meant to represent what we believe is the majority sentiment in the community, and how they would like to see this proceed. And certainly within the process, there were surveys, and there were public meetings, charrette style, and we had presentations by qualified people in some cases, and but I want to make it clear on my own part that that is not the only information I am relying on. This has been very, very talked about issue. We went through an election. We heard lots. Personally, I think Jay mentioned, or maybe it was Mason that mentioned that. But I don't know, Mayor Clark, if you would agree with me completely. But everywhere I've gone in the last 7 months, I have received all kinds of unsolicited opinion, whether it's at the grocery store or, you know, out for a walk, at a social event, whatever. We have received a lot of opinion on that. And the consensus is what is reflected in this particular motion. The motion itself is also important to see all three parts. There is a request to bring the monument back, but the next two, I believe, speak to some of Councillor Follis's concerns, in that it is a commitment to create a new narrative and speak directly about the context. It's a chance to discuss Champlain in the early 1600s and what was going on there, the actual history, which is, again, very fascinating, but it also is an opportunity to discuss the mindset in the early 1900s when this monument was created. In my mind, that is a wonderful opportunity to educate and to continue the discussion. But it also has a third part, and that refers to the ongoing process. And I think, again, Councillor Follis, I admire your eloquence in this particular issue, on this particular issue. To me, this is a very important part of this motion for this council, which I would point out we have been working on it. We haven't been perfect, but certainly we have good communications with our Indigenous friends and neighbors, and we have opportunities to move forward along the lines that we're laying out here in a very positive way, and so. I'm actually I'm very hopeful that that's going to produce some of the results you're looking for. So with that said, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lauer. On the main motion, Councillor Follis.
Just some last pieces here. I'm not going to speak to the way the motion's going to be voted on, but the one thing I ask is that everything that we deliberate here, if we're going to have a vote on each thing, that we do a recorded vote. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands in the air, what I have seen, just to reiterate, because I'll deal with the main motion and the amendment, then the main motion. I'll deal with that first, but before I call the question, I'll go back to your original desire, Councillor Follis. So, staff, if you hopefully I articulated well enough verbally an amendment that you were able to put that to paper and to screen. A seconder. I think it was moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Emon. This is the proposed amendment that would see Councillor Lauer and I continue to work on an additional narrative or educational piece somewhere within the vicinity of the Champlain Monument. And then it would Councillor Follows would replace me on the number 2, which would be to explore additional strategies that would assist the community in helping move the national issue of reconciliation forward in a meaningful way. I'm not going to entertain discussion until I get the amendment before me, if that's okay. But then I certainly will. You reflect that same change on the screen, though. Thank you. Is there a desire to have me leave the chair for this amendment? Okay. If you do, I'll gladly leave it. Thank you. Okay, it appears as though we have both wordings are the same. So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Iman, that the motion now before Council be amended by substituting the second paragraph of the resolution as follows. And that Mayor Clark and Councillor Lauer work with representatives of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation and the Huron-Wendat Nation to create an accompanying narrative that would more accurately reflect the complete history and context of the Champlain Monument, and that Councillor Lauer and Councillor Follis work with representatives of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation and the Huron-Wendat Nation to explore additional strategies that would assist the community in helping move the national issue of reconciliation forward in a meaningful way. I'll go for entertain discussion now. I got Councillor Follis, Councillor Heen, and Councillor Sapola in queue.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be nominated. However, I'm going to actually vote against this. The reason is, and I'm happy to participate in this discussion, happy to serve on this committee. There's two reasons. One is I really think it's important that we have the mayor included in this. I think it symbolizes the importance of this discussion. And I think also I have a lot of confidence in Mayor Clark and his knowledge of what he brings to the table, and he's already very familiar with this. And so I think in the last second putting me in there, I don't know if it'll, if it really will accomplish what it needs to. But if you guys choose to put me in there, I'm more than happy to serve as the representative for the city. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Councillor Follis. Just before I go to Councillor Heen, I will say I'm sorry. I guess I misinterpreted where you wanted to go after our discussion earlier, so I apologize for that. I'm glad to be part of the process, whether I'm formally on paper or getting continuous updates from you and Councillor Lauer. So I'm good either way. But I do not want. I understand that you're willing to stand if your name's put forward and voted on, but I also don't think it's. I don't want to put you in a situation you don't want to be in. So if you're saying to me you'd rather not do this, then I will ask the members of council to defeat this amendment.
I think, well, I'm certainly, again, I'm certainly honored to be nominated. I think it probably benefits the conversation, the discussion, if you serve as the representative. That's just my interpretation.
Councillor Heen, do you want to weigh in on this?
Actually, I concur with Councillor Follis. And unless we have 3 representatives, I think that when we're dealing with Rama First Nation and the Huron-Wendat, I think it's important that the mayor be one of the representatives, just by merit of your position. To not have you there, I think would be almost an insult to the others involved. So I think that either we increase the membership to 3, which I'd be willing to do, but I think it's very important that as mayor that you be part of that representation.
Thank you, Councillor Heen. Well, it's certainly not meant to be an insult to anybody. So, Councillor Spola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Both Councillor Heen and Councillor Follis said almost exactly what I was going to say. I think I have no problem with 3 people serving on it, but I think you should be on that. And I would be prepared to amend, if it needs to be, that the Mayor, Tim Lauer, and Councillor Follis work with representatives. And I haven't said anything on the first motion, and I won't, because I think everything that was said prior to that.
Well, if we are going to have more discussion on that, I'll wait till we get back to it. Okay, so I am hearing the possibility of an amendment to the amendment. Is there a mover for the amendment? No?
Sorry.
For the amendment to the amendment. Moved by Councillor Iman, and that would be to enshrine the 3 of us, I think, on that particular aspect, which I am comfortable with. So moved by Councillor Iman, seconded by Councillor Cipolla. It looks like staff are already on this. Process? I'll wait till Okay, apparently we have a dead air filler brought to you by Councillor Cipolla. Go ahead.
Councillor, I just, in my comments, I just wanted to mention that we have in the audience, we have Karen Freely and we have Jacqueline Sochka, who have organized the committee for the last they've lived this for the last 7 months and done a great job.
Moved by Councillor Iman, seconded by Councillor Cipolla, that the amendment now before Council be amended further by adding Mayor Clark in the second paragraph of the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Councillor Follis.
I will reluctantly accept. I think the one thing I really want to emphasize is that I don't want this to be the main focus of the discussion is a single name being added to the committee. I think ultimately, you know, this is about the monument itself and finding the right equation there, and I hope we can find that. If it's the will of fellow councillors and the mayor to have me on, I'm very honored to do so. But I hope that, you know, the main focus of the conversation remains with, you know, how do we move forward with the aims of reconciliation. Thanks.
Well, I think you've nailed a couple of things there, Councillor Follis. This second motion really has very little to do with the monument. It would be focused on finding meaningful ways to further reflect the past and bring a healthier, continuously a healthier relationship between our two peoples. So that is the nature of that amendment to the amendment. Councillor Iman.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. And I just want to say that based on my experience, when I feel passionate about something, I think I stand up and become involved in it. And so if you want to be part of the solution, you step up and you become part of the solution as opposed to just identifying a problem. And so I think it's appropriate in this context, Councillor Follis, that you actively and enthusiastically participate in this exercise, not reluctantly.
Thank you, Councillor Follis and Councillor Iman. Councillor Cipolla.
Thank you. Just a clarification to Councillor Follis. Do you want to be on this committee or not? Pretty simple.
I'll accept that question through the chair, not directly across to our colleague, Councillor Follis.
Clarify. So I reluctantly accept, but of course I'll be actively involved and very happy to participate with full enthusiasm, just to make that very clear. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on somebody's phone ringing an important issue? It wouldn't be a meeting of council if your phone or Councillor Sepulveda's phone didn't go off, Councillor Heen. So I am going to read this because I want to give it the gravity that is due these amendments in the motion. Moved by Councillor Eamon, seconded by Councillor Sepulveda. The amendment now before council be amended by further adding Mayor Clark in the second paragraph of the amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? I'll now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I will go back now to the amendment to the main motion, which is on the screen before you, I believe. So the amendment as amended, if I may phrase it that way. Would anybody like it reread? Any further discussion, questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. I will ask, just out of courtesy, if anybody wants the main motion reread. Yes, thank you. I will. If you put your hand in the air, I'll address you, Councillor Follis. Any further discussion on the main motion? Okay, staff, we have had a requested recorded vote, so I'll have you cue us up for that, please. Thank you. For those in the audience at home, there is the main motion as amended twice.
Members may proceed to vote. I will end the vote, Mr. Mayor, and read the results. Councillor Campbell, yes. Councillor Follis, no. Councillor Ainsworth, yes. Councillor Heen, yes. Councillor Sepulveda, yes. Councillor Cloustra, yes. Mayor Clark, yes. Councillor Eamon, yes. Councillor Lauer, yes. The motion is carried.
Indeed, thank you very much. Thanks all for your input on that. As I say, I believe no matter what discussion I heard around the table, I think the ultimate goal for one and all is the very same in the end, and we'll work meaningfully towards that. And just for clarity, and thank you, Councillor Lauer, for whispering in my ear. Just a reminder for those at home, I think I addressed it earlier. This is just a report from myself and Councillor Lauer that will go to the working group. The working group will consider all kinds of criteria in their decision making, not just the input that we referenced this evening, and then I'm only speaking about process now. But then the working group will make the Champlain working group will make a recommendation to Parks Canada, who will in the end be the adjudicators. But again, we'll take everything into consideration, and I'm sure whatever the result, we'll be working towards the same goal. I have no motions, no notices of motions. Not aware of any deputation motion, except Madam CAO. I know Councillor Sepulveda was suggesting a letter from the city to the either AMO or the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, and I was talking about perhaps potentially joining forces with the health unit and with the city of Barrie and co-penning a letter, which I think might be the more effective, and we could fire that off to AMO and to the province and Madam CEO, would that be germane to the deputation that we had this evening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the deputation intent was for the health unit to sort of clarify their programming related to the funding request that they've submitted to the city. So a letter to the province with respect to legislative authority related to smoking is really not germane to the intent of the original deputation motion, but certainly a member of council, your call, Mr. Mayor, as to whether you're comfortable that it is in fact whether it is in fact germane. The alternative is that this issue, a member of council could raise this issue as a request during an inquiry process or through a notice of motion at the next council meeting. But certainly your call, Mr. Mayor, if you believe that it is in fact germane. If I can just add to that, Mr. Mayor, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario did in fact do some lobby efforts to the province quite some time ago at the beginning of the stages of the legislation. So there was certainly those requests that were made to give the municipalities far more authority, and the province at that stage did not change any of the legislation.
Indeed, thank you. I think I'm going to. I believe it could be argued that there is a relevance to the motion in terms of enforcement, not to the actual ask for the resource and the enforcement. So, but I think I am comfortable, Madam CEO. The AMO conference takes place in August, about the third week of August. So I believe that, Councillor Cipolla, if you're comfortable, that we could bring this back as a notice of motion in July, and we could, and in the meantime, I can reach out to the city of Barrie, at least their mayor, and see if they're willing to do the same, and then and hopefully join forces with SMD HDU and put something in Councillor Ainsworth's pocket as he heads off to AMO. Madam CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly a good suggestion. What you could, that it does not preclude you from having a conversation with the mayor of the city of Barrie and/or the health unit, and perhaps that notice of motion might be more comprehensive to actually include the detail that you actually want to put in your letter to the province.
Indeed, and I will take that as direction. Councillor Cipolla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just if you wouldn't mind having that conversation with Dr. Gardner, and what I was looking for is some kind of a letter from you, support addressed to the health unit, so that we can start communicating with Barrie on a very positive. But if you're willing to do that, I'm happy with that. So if you can reach out to Dr. Gardner and the mayor of Barrie, I think it's really important. So I thank you for that.
Indeed, I will reach out to both Dr. Gardner and Mayor Lehman. Thank you for that. Consent agenda. We can. Madam Deputy Clerk, are you aware of any items being pulled for change of direction or discussion under consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor Clark, at this time I'm aware of Councillor Heen wishing to speak to item 3. That's the request from the DOMB to refer correspondence to the Parking Advisory Committee. And I'm also aware of Councillor Heen and yourself wishing to speak to consent item 4, which is the request for a letter of support from Raymond Curie.
Thank you very much. And I'll now wait for a motion to capture the rest of the consent agenda items. Is there a mover and seconder for the motion you see on the screen before you? Moved by Councillor Heen, seconded by Councillor Campbell. And moved by Councillor Heen and seconded by Councillor Campbell that Council adopt the recommendations as set out on the consent agenda for the regular meeting of Council on June 24th, 2019. Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. Any further discussion, questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Oh.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe just 2 items need to be spoken to.
Sorry, for some reason I had in my mind that it was a change of direction. It wasn't a change of direction. It was just to speak to. So if the chamber will allow me, I'll allow that to go on right now. So Councillor Heen, you wish to speak to number 3 and then number 4.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Number 3 was an email from a lady, Marilyn Lockhart, who was concerned about downtown parking and getting a ticket. And I use every excuse I can to try and tell people about the wonderful new program that we have where you can pay using your smartphone. And I actually carry flyers in my purse and in my car, so I can educate people on the fact that you can pay. You can actually pay using your telephone, and each parking lot and each parking meter is numbered, so that you can use your phone and pay by using a smartphone. The wonderful thing about this program is that 10 minutes before your time is up, your phone will buzz and let you know that the time is up. So if you're shopping at a restaurant, you can then pay on your telephone, and you're not going to get a ticket. So I've always believed that there's a solution to every problem, and so this is the solution that we have in place. Somebody has to pay for the parking somehow, and this is the way we can do it. So if you have a smartphone, look into this wonderful new program that we have. You can access it through your phone, and then you don't have to worry about getting a ticket.
Indeed, the passport or the app is called Passport, and you never need to receive another ticket for parking at an expired meeting in the city of Orillia, and even making it more sunshine. And Councillor Heenan, item number 4.
Yes, number 4 is a letter from Ray Carey, who is articulated in great detail about a program that he wants our support for, and I really wanted to speak in support of Mr. Carey. I've known him for 40 years. His kids were in nursery school with my kids, and I'm I'm so aware of the wonderful work that he's done. Although my son David did not take classes from Ray, he counts Ray as one of the teachers in the high school that had one of the greatest influences on him. And so to have a teacher that didn't teach you as one of the greatest influences really speaks to this character. He used to allow this group of computer nerds to go into his classroom after school, and as David said when I was talking to him earlier today, he could play with all the great toys, all the computers that were in his class, and he used to allow them to learn and develop, and he used to encourage them, and he was just a wonderful influence, and that's what Ray is so well known for. He was an encourager and an influencer, and he brought kids along. And you know, he was a diamond amongst teachers, and there aren't a lot of teachers like him. And so the amount of work that he's put into developing this program, we need to encourage him and give him all the support he can. So it's my very great honor to say, let's go for it, Ray, and give him all the support we can.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Spola.
On that note, thanks, Pat, for pulling it. I also had a long conversation with him, and I think he's asking for support to relate to Mary Lee Fullerton to investigate this model that he created many years ago, which at that time had a lot of support from me and from a lot of people within our community. So, and I'm just wondering, does he need a letter from our council? So do we need a motion, Mr. Mayor, to do that?
I believe that may very well be the nature of the item on the consent agenda, so I think this is it's been put on the agenda to kind of enshrine that support.
Okay, thank you.
And seeing other hands in the air, I will make a couple of comments. It's not a change of direction. I also, I believe, have known Ray Carey as long as you have. I was a young punk student in high school when I met him. Again, he wasn't my teacher, and nor did I date him. But I do fully understand the merits of his program. Since even well before coming to office, I've been well acquainted with the program that was implemented a few decades ago within the city of Orillia, and then had the opportunity to attend a reception, little seminar forum presentation that he held at St. Paul's Church a few years ago. And he brought back students that he had 10, 20, 30 years ago. And I will tell you that this program is wonderful because it trains people to be tradespeople. It supplies business with needed tradespeople, and that issue right now is as acute as it's probably been for many decades within this area and beyond. But what it also does and did is it takes people who some of the people in the program may have been teetering on which side of the tracks they were going to fall, the metaphorical tracks, and really gave them a reason to be focused and be involved in positive habits. And some of these folks now own businesses in this area and employ many people. One went on to become a professional woman golfer in the WPGA. I'm missing CWPGA. Anyway, for example, and to see these people that come back and give their testimonials to the strength of this program really was it was emotionally moving, but the solid stuff that comes out of this program was wonderful. Creating the people, supplying people business with jobs, and then of course telling these stories and creating other examples for others to follow in the back. So I'm as they come along. So I'm very glad to pen this letter with council's blessing. Thank you. Any further discussion on any item on the consent agenda, which I think I've already called? I'll call it again. Madam CEO, I did already call the question and had unanimity, so we're good? Okay, I did have unanimity on that, so I don't think it's going to be a controversial item. The chair apologizes. Thank you for that. Bylaws. Somebody willing to move in second? Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, second by Councillor Iman. I'll wait. Shall begin. I'll wait till they hit me before I start reading them. I'll prepare my voice because it takes a while. Yes. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, second by Councillor Iman, that the following bylaws be enacted. 2019-76, a bylaw to provide. You provide that blocks 13 and 16 on registered plan 51M 1096 North Lake Village Subdivision Phase 2 are not subject to part law control under the Planning Act. 1868334 Ontario Inc. Titan Homes. 166, 170, 174, 178, 182, 186, 301, 305, 309, and 313 Lucy Lane. 2019-77, a bylaw to adopt Chapter 99 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code Affordable Housing Committee. 2019-78, a bylaw to adopt Chapter 374 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code Site Alteration. 2019-79, a bylaw to amend Chapter 452 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code Environmental Services and Operations, Development Services and Engineering. 2019-80, a bylaw to amend Chapter 170 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code Bylaw Bylaw Enforcement Officer. 2019-81, a bylaw to amend Chapter 251 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code Delegated Authority. Okay, sorry. Yeah, they're sorry. I know the subsequent bylaw is the confirmation bylaw. All right, so let's just find. So, any further discussion on the proposed bylaws? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have one more bylaw to confirm the proceedings. Is somebody willing to move and second? Because we Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Sepola, that bylaw number 2019-82, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on this very day, June 24th, 2019, be enacted and read only once. Moved by Councillor Campbell and seconded by Councillor Sepola. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, this is the part of the meeting where we have an open public forum. And if there's anybody in the audience who wants to take the microphone, you're more than welcome at this point. Yeah. Welcome back, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Phillips, just before you get going, I will read just the procedure for this particular aspect of the meeting. Each speaker shall be required to provide their name and whether they are a resident or not. Each speaker shall speak only to issues within the municipal jurisdiction. Each speaker shall be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Each open public forum period shall be limited to a maximum of 30 minutes. And members of council shall not answer questions which require staff to input. The mayor may request the speaker to put their concerns in writing. With that being said, Mr. Phillips, even though we know who you are, if you'd be so kind as to identify yourself and state whether you're a resident or a non-resident, the floor is yours.
Address Council. I would like the following to be brought to Council's attention.
Mr. Phillips, you could speak just a little closer to the microwave. I think that would benefit yourself and others.
I won't have to shout. Before I address Council, Mr. Mayor, I would like the following information to be brought to the attention of City Council. Thank you.
If you, maybe Ms. Ruff, if you would gather that, we can hand that out to Council subsequently. The floor is yours, Mr. Phillips.
As a result of information presented to the Provincial Minister of Transportation, the following information was received by MPP Jill Dunlop, informing her that under the Municipal Act, funding is provided to the City, authorising transportation service be provided to all residents. This statement corresponds with the Federal Minister of Transportation Directive that the City was responsible to provide transportation to all residents under their constitutional rights and the Seniors Abuse Act. Did not the Mayor receive legal documentation on this subject? The residents of the West Ward Extension Route are taxpayers whose taxes are paid to obtain transportation, among other benefits. Many of those residents are seniors on fixed incomes and do not have medical certificates to apply for transit services under other directions. Families with young children have to walk downhill for a considerable distance with no sidewalks to get to a transportation service. Council was provided with information declaring the decision of the human rights. Statements referring to constant problems with passengers not being able to transfer to other routes and similar statements of this nature were declared to be with the intention of not providing a transportation service on the extension route in the West Ward for the residents. A decision was arrived at that the constitution of the rights of the residents were being denied a public transit service. Discrimination was also in effect. Therefore, our decision is restore this transit service under the constitutional rights of the residents. Information was also presented to legal counsel in the service of the Deputy Critic of Provincial of Transportation and the Provincial Ombudsman, who confirmed the decision of the Human Rights Tribunal. All declared that from the facts presented to them, in their considered legal opinion, there was no grounds in which transportation services cannot operate in this area as was previously done. The service had previously operated for over 40 years on the same roads with no problems at all before being removed, resulting in civil action being raised, resulting in the decision reached. Transportation operated on an hourly basis. There are no grounds in which transit cannot operate in the area in the same manner under the Municipal Act. City appointed a consultant on matters relating to transportation. He was informed of the decision by the Human Rights Tribunal, involvement of both federal and provincial governments, provincial deputy critic of transportation, who all concluded constitutional rights and discrimination existed. Whereas human rights had declared restored the transit service under constitutional rights, all parties concluded there was no grounds by which transit can operate in this area. Transit routes are still operating on the same routes with no changes being made. Passenger levels have dropped considerably. Buses are running in areas approved by Council for the betterment of residents. Does this betterment also apply to those residents in the West Ward where constitutional rights and discrimination are in effect? It was declared that the city is failing to accept the findings of the Human Rights Tribunal, which is clear and concise. All the residents want is a transit service to service the requirements under their constitutional rights once an hour. There are 475 residents in that area who are wondering what is going to happen to the transit service being restored under the decision given by the Human Rights Tribunal, and what other directions do we have to go to?
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. If you're done, great.
No,
you have about 15 seconds.
This morning I consulted with the legal service clinic in Colburn Street on this matter of transit services. A question arose on the constant problems of passengers and the statement made referring to if you passengers want, our residents and passengers want a transit service, get yourself a medical certificate, which was demeaning to the residents. Consultation was provided and legal direction was given to the city by legal counsel to the City Hall on this matter of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips, for the update. As I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, your passion on this is quite notable. And our next guest.
My name is Jerry Metzger. I live on Victoria Crescent. Obviously, I'm here to talk about south end of Forest Avenue. I have about 9 or 10 points, but I'm going to talk about 2. The first one is a compliment to the council that at last week you decided not to have another survey. I think our experience has been that as VPRA, we started off with a survey. The survey was sent to 115 members of VPRA, and the results was overwhelming against barging, but no objection to boat launches. Well, Grape Island wasn't happy with the results, and then it launched an entire campaign, and it confused people and basically ended up pitting neighbors against neighbors. So we had a very hostile relationship between our neighborhood, and that's a very unfortunate thing. So I am certainly glad that when a survey is sent out and people respond to surveys, they have certain expectations that they're listened to, and they may even perceive that they're right in their opinion, and that staff and council would take it into consideration. So it was a good idea not to have a survey, and doing research by staff is the proper way to go. The second point I wanted to make is I caution you very carefully about the extent of the research. We're really talking about one neighborhood imposing itself on another neighborhood. Focusing on what the imposing neighborhood really wants is really not a just way to go about the process. Obviously, folks on the island can only gain by the facility, and they are not detrimentally affected by whatever happens in South Forest Avenue. So I caution you against, or caution staff against limiting the input they gather from neighbors and only focusing on people that will actually only benefit from the study. Okay, so keep that in mind, that if you focus on one side and not the other side, you're not going to get the representation of the folks that are affected. Okay, but other than that, I think we're on the right track, and we'll be sending you the information that we've received from MTO, from engineering, from environmental groups. We've got a whole lot of stuff. And if anybody wants results of the survey, we'll still have the original documents that came back. And if that proves, and some changed their mind after that campaign from Grape Island. We got letters back that said, I'm sorry, I changed my mind. We don't want to do this anymore. I now understand that you might go to West, and I don't want to see it in front of my house. So we have a complete thread in history on this file. Right? So thank you very much for both of these things.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mesker. Very much appreciated. And yes, we certainly hope for a quick and meaningful resolution to this. Is there anybody else who wishes to, another no stranger to this chamber?
I could be a stranger. It's Brian Greer. I'm a resident of Orillia. I'll lead by saying I'm thrilled that Council has taken a first step towards the reinstallation of Vernon March's magnificent work of art in the park. As a creator, and this is a bit of a sidebar, I can't help but feel that not a lot of today's viewers look at that work and understand the effort and the ability that March put into illustrating the dignity and strength of the First Nations people that he portrayed in the piece. Orillia was ground zero for the European arrival in Ontario and the intersection, the collision, and the relationship with the First Nations peoples. After more than a year, it would be a shame if we came away and decided to put up a plaque. This is a terrific opportunity to go back to Parks Canada, requesting federal funding for a complete and impressive educational installation, not just about the monument, but about the history of that historic collision of peoples. We've got 5,000 years to talk about here in Orillia. It's an ask, and a big ask, the city should be making of the federales. They attempted initially to throw the pressure and the challenge on the city and other people. Let's throw it back at them with a big ask for funding. And that funding is for education, not just competing statuary. It may be a proper museum. Ask. Mandela suggested that reconciliation without truth was neither truth nor reconciliation. This is actually a terrific opportunity for Orillia to make itself into a destination for history seekers, truth seekers, and people who'd like to know more about where this country came from. We've got 5,000 years to share with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greer, for your articulation on that. Seeing no other stampede to the microphone, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Cipolla, seconded by Councillor Heen. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, one and all. Safe home to members of the council and certainly members of the public. And thanks for your patience in the audience.